Hi there. So let's continue talking about the Green Revolution and what it means in more modern times. So we know from a previous lesson and from the chapter on agriculture in our textbook that the Green Revolution is also called the Third Agricultural Revolution because it introduced biotechnology advancements and modifications, genetic modifications to organisms to produce a higher yield. It also produced some of the biotech advancements that it produced are artificial fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides that we really didn't quite know at the beginning what kind of long-term impact it was going to have on the rest of nature that wasn't genetically modified in order to take those herbicides, chemicals, and things like that. So we're going to continue to look at the more modern take on the Green Revolution, and please remember that this Green Revolution that we talk about in agriculture, in geography class, is not like what they're talking about in politics right now with the Green New Deal and going solar or, reducing emissions and stuff like that. In geography class, what we're talking about with the Green Revolution is the Third Agricultural Revolution, which focused not only on plant modifications like I mentioned in the previous lecture, but also with industrialized agriculture in general, we look at animal modification. So there are a lot of genetically modified animals added to the food supply. Now, before you freak out, genetic modification can come in a variety of different pathways. It doesn't necessarily have to be getting into the microscopic level and fiddling with the chromosomes and the DNA, although some of it is like that. But if you have a toy poodle or if you have a Labrador retriever or any of those kinds of breeds of dogs that weren't in the original species of dogs that have been man-made, so to speak, those are genetic modified animals also. My husband's hunting dog is some crazy wacko retriever pointer, crazy for hunting dog that the German culture bred. It's called a Deutsch Drahthaar. Anyway, he's cute as can be, but man, that sucker, all he wants to do is point and retrieve and hunt and all that kind of thing. And that's how they bred him. So he's genetically modified from like 4 different breeds that they used until they found exactly what they wanted in that particular behavior, that particular breed standard, so to speak. But the kinds of modifications that we're talking about here are not your little lap dog or my husband's hunting dog. They are focused mainly to be able to produce in assembly line format a higher yield of animal to meet the protein needs. So, I'm sure you are a label reader like I am, but you can go to the fresh produce section or even the canned meat and fish section in the canned area in the grocery store, and you will see labels that have to do with what has hormones added, what has antibiotics added, what is a hybrid breed, what has been genetically modified to produce a certain type of animal, chickens, for instance. If you go in and buy your 99 cent a pound chicken at the grocery store, quite often that chicken has been housed in, we call them chicken houses, and they look large, but when you have 10,000 chickens, 100,000 actually, that's a little bit, that's a sparsely populated chicken house. If you have 100,000 chickens in about a 3,000 square foot space, and that's where they live their life, they can transmit diseases among them, and therefore antibiotics are added to their food supply in order to be able for more of them to grow to their desired weight and size. Modifications have been made to their genetics so that they will grow more rapidly or so that their breast tissue will grow and be the largest muscle on the body rather than say that the thighs and the legs, which are if the animals are free-range, non-genetically modified. Hormones are added so that if we do want a certain type of meat to be more prevalent or larger on an animal, and I'm using chickens as an example, but we're going to look at the American beef industry too. These kinds of things can make growth happen much more rapidly. So this is another part of the advancements. Can I make air quotes on that? I'm trying not to be too sarcastic with this because it does give us a lot more food in the food supply to feed a lot more people. However, hunger and death related to food insecurity is still a huge problem in the world. So you did the project on the second agricultural revolution in these countries that have, a lot of people related to the agricultural jobs that are necessary to produce the food that the country needs. But in the third agricultural revolution, shipment of food from one place to the next is it happens much more often. You can import a whole lot of food from a whole lot of places, and you can get it year round. So it's not just our apples in season. You can find multiple types of apples on the shelves at Super Walmart, all through the year. Avocados from Mexico are advertised year round, right? Grapes, which have a particular climate and a particular time of year for them to be produced. The Green Revolution gives not only a larger climate or growing season for these things because of the genetic modifications that can be made, but the transportation in the globalized world that the Green Revolution brought into being means that we can have these things year round, really. So when we look at the kinds of additives that have been included in our meat food supply, many people in modern days are, rebelling kind of, or at least resisting the hormones, the antibiotics, the different kinds of genetic modifications that are added. Other types of chemicals also. There's other medications that are added. For instance, chicken feed, they add antidepressants. Prozac in particular is added to chicken feed very often because chickens are very they're scared. They get scared very easily, and they will stampede. So if you're enclosed in this enormous chicken house and there's one little noise or something falls or they get scared, they will stampede to the other side and they don't know when to stop. And so many of them will climb up on the top of the other ones and squash each other and kill them. There's a whole lot of loss for chicken farmers when that happens. And so in order to try to calm the chickens down, another thing that they add is not just these two things, but antidepressants, so that the chicken's emotions are a little less excitable. Sometimes I would like some of that additive in my food too. But we never know what we're getting in the food supply in the Green Revolution because these things were seen as beneficial to producing more food in a world where food was scarce, in a world where population theorists said food supply and food availability is going to be an issue for, to support the whole population. So these things were seen as beneficial advancements in agriculture during the third agricultural revolution. So if you look at, and I'm going to curate some videos for you about these two topics. I've got a video about the American beef industry. And remember, industry is talking about manufacturing as much as we can, factory style. So we're not talking about, what do they say on TV? This cheese comes from happy cows in California. We're not talking about happy cows. We're talking about cows shoved into the smallest food plot area that you possibly can, and very few of them can even move as much as I'm shifting back and forth my weight right now because they're packed into such a small area. And this is added and this is added and other chemicals are added to their feed in order to cut down on the spread of diseases and things that would make their meat unsellable. Also, you can read or do some research, maybe for an outside source. Bill Gates is a big one about this. He wants zero emissions, and he talks a lot about population control in Africa also. So he's like a climate theorist, population theorist in one. His wealth has enabled him to focus on other things, not just Microsoft computers anymore. But he has a lot of statement about zero emissions and how the American beef industry in general has, like, I think the last statistic I checked, and you can update this when you do a search, was like 6% of the greenhouse emissions that the USA produces comes from this industry. And so anyway, so I'll show you a video on that, but you could do some research for an outside source maybe, and look at some of the stuff that Bill Gates says about it. And then also cultured meat. Now I've got cultured in quotation marks here because I'm not talking about taking them to a museum of art or going to the opera house. I'm talking about culturing in a laboratory. So if they want to know if you have strep throat and they scrape your throat and put it in a petri dish and they have to call you a couple of hours or days later to let you know, do you have strep throat or not? They have to culture that bacteria and observe, is that strep bacteria reproducing? Is that what's causing you this pain, this illness? So they culture this in a laboratory. So now, instead of shoving cows into too small of a space for all those cows, or giving chickens Prozac so they won't kill themselves in a stampede, some people's solution, furthering the green revolution, some people's solution is culturing meat in a laboratory. There's a great big industry in Memphis, Tennessee right now, right across the Mississippi River. There's a lab that takes tiny little particles, biopsy-sized particles from chicken breast, for instance, which is such a popular food in the United States. Chicken fingers and chicken nuggets and these kinds of things that are made out of the breast meat on a chicken. You can take 2 or 3 molecules of this stuff from a live animal and take it to a laboratory and grow the entire chicken breast, and it's never been attached to a chicken before. And then you take tiny little particles from that lab created one and you make 16 more, and tiny particles of that one and you make 47 more, etc. And the meat has never been part of a living, breathing animal at all. This is a great thing. This is a scary thing. You tell me. This cuts down on emissions. It cuts down on environmental impact. It potentially gives the solution to food deserts. It potentially gives the solution to urban agriculture. It potentially gives a solution to feeding the world or life on Mars, even, if we're looking at that kind of behavior in the future. So watch these videos that I'm going to curate for you, and we will talk about this more the next time we see each other. Bye!